Believe me when I say this, don't envy every rich man or woman that you come across, because most of it is ill-gotten wealth. Let's have a look at this cover of the Daily Nation, for example, and I quote, 39 billion scam. US agents target Kenyan properties. On to the subheader. Payback. Payback since 2022. Kenya has featured in courts in the US state of Minnesota during a 39 billion corruption trial. Masterminds of the COVID-era scandal invested part of the cash stolen from the US taxpayers in Kenya, buying high-end apartments and luxury resorts. Now, with their conviction, US authorities are on the trail of the ill-gotten wealth. And you can see an individual called Abdiaziz Farah, Abdi Majid Noor, Mukhtar Sharif, Hayat Noor, and Mohammed Ismail. Then right next to Mohammed Ismail, there's another text which reads, Karibu Palms Resort in Diani, which convict Liban Alishire bought using part of his stolen 315 million. He agreed to surrender the property. So let me explain how this scam works. Picture this. At the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, when schools were closed and fear was everywhere, the US government released emergency funds meant for hungry children. The program was called Feeding Our Future. It was meant to be a simple, noble cause where the US government gave out meals to low-income kids because they could no longer eat at school under shutdown. Now here's where the plot thickens. Some goons from Minnesota came up with a non-profit organization called Feeding Our Future, and guess what? The state of Minnesota trusted those goons to oversee millions of dollars from the federal child nutrition program. And instead of distributing food, the Feeding Our Future non-profit started approving fake food sites which claimed to be feeding thousands of children every day. In some sites, they claimed to be serving 3,000 meals, 5,000 meals, or even 10,000 meals daily. But in reality, there were no children and there was no food. It was all just a big scam. Now in comes the second question. Where did the money go to? First up, right here in Nairobi, Kenya, a high-rise apartment building was purchased, specifically in the South Sea neighborhood near Nairobi National Park. According to the DOJ, Department of Justice, that is, another defendant bought an aircraft in Nairobi using the same funds. You go to Diani, another one of these shifty individuals allegedly wired $216,000 towards purchasing Karibu Palms Resort in Diani Beach, just right next to the Indian Ocean. Still on the US Department of Justice report, some of the funds were also used to buy land in Mandera town along the border with Somalia and Ethiopia. Again, let me reiterate. Don't envy wealthy men and women. For some of them, you just never know how they came about those funds. These are people who are going to scam taxpayers abroad to then come and wash the money in this country. You have heard of South Sea, you have heard of Diani, you've heard of Mandera town. Others are even buying planes and they're chartering them to us. These are some of the things which need to be recouped by the US and Kenyan government, sold, and then we share the spoils. Sababu hii pesa hatuwezi rudishia wa America much as ni yao. The crime was committed on both countries. The funds were stolen in America, invested in Kenya. We will seize them, sell them, tukatane katikati nusu-nusu. Because that is what they would have done in America anyway. I don't think they'd send it all the way back to Kenya if at all. And this is what's going on in this country, left, right, center. Scammers si wale pekee wako Minnesota. Even this housing program, kuna watu wanakulia illegally. Overpricing cement, overpricing chuma ya D10, D12, D8, overpricing BRT. Everything is through the roof for the sake of somebody getting kickbacks and stealing from the nation. As we deal with these people who stole from America, we must also ask ourselves, who are these people who are currently stealing from this republic? Because pia wale wanaiba Kenya ni exchange program. Hawa wanaiba huko wanaleta hapa. Wetu wanaiba hapa wanapeleka Dubai na kwingine. So we must also start looking into that. But anywho guys, let's see what Kenyans on X had to say about this. And I quote, Brian Okello said, from Minnesota to Minnesota. Well said, Brian. Godfrey Mugambi said, was just wondering how a Somali president could come open a big mall in Isili in the company of Duale, who has become very arrogant of late. He has kept very silent on this matter. Serikali ya majambazi ikiongozwa na jambazi. Combo Steve said, the US government itabidi ianze kushindana na boma yangu kuuza nyumba. The Kenyan property market is saturated with overpriced houses. Information Technology said, USA does not play with taxpayer funds. They have the reach and means to claw back their money. Sir Isaac Newton said, in the same way that funds meant for development in Mandera, Wajir, Isiolo finds its way to Eastleigh. Ironically, Eastleigh was never mentioned in this report, but that's an interesting tweet right there. Gatonga Kairu said, 39 billion is just a drop in the ocean, literally. The fraud must be quite extensive. If the US authorities dig a little deeper, the entire of South B, C, and Parklands will suddenly become empty shells. Selector Physicus said, wakifukuzwa US watakuja Kenya. Please be vigilant. Nchi yetu isiwe another Nigeria, Sudan, ama.
Hello guys, good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are watching me from. So thank you for coming back to watch this channel, and I really appreciate. So today I want us to look at videos which have been trending all over the internet about the fraud which has happened in Minnesota, and there are funds that have been stolen there, and the fun thing is they are being traced back to Kenya. So it is an investigation which is underway. So we put a disclaimer. So it's underway. Whatever we are going to discuss here is for educational purposes only. So over the past few years, the US authorities have uncovered several fraud cases involving government funds, and in some of these investigations, a surprising pattern has emerged, whereby money allegedly traced beyond US borders into real estate markets in East Africa, particularly in Kenya. So this video looks at what is being alleged, how these schemes are said to operate, and why investigations are paying close attention. So while making one thing clear, these are allegations under investigations, not conclusions about any community as a whole. Yes. So according to the court findings and even the media reports, law enforcement statements, some individuals of Somali origin who are living in the United States have been accused of participating in fraud schemes involving programs such as pandemic relief funds, food assistance programs, or healthcare billing. So authorities allege that millions of dollars meant for public aid were fraudulently obtained, often through falsehood records, shell companies, or coordinated networks. These cases are still working. Their way through the legal system, and outcomes vary depending on the evidence and jurisdiction. So the Kenya real estate is connected in this way, like how the Kenya now real estate is coming into play here. So investigations claim that portions of the money were moved overseas and invested in real estate, particularly in Nairobi and other fast-growing Kenyan cities. So property investments are often attractive because they can store value, they can even generate income and be harder to trace across borders. So Kenya's booming real estate market, combined with the strong diaspora ties, makes it a logical destination for overseas investments, for both legal and illegal investments. However, authorities are stressing that owning property abroad is not a crime, but the concern is whether the funds used were obtained lawfully. So that is the main point of concern, whether the funds which are being used to fund these real estates were obtained lawfully. So millions of Somali Americans who are living in America, they work and contribute legally to society. Law enforcement agencies themselves, they emphasize that fraud cases involve specific suspects, not the whole community. So let's continue watching the video, and we'll come back with more comments.
All right, now the FBI are now targeting Kenyan properties worth 39 billion Kenya shillings, which are suspected to be proceeds of what you will call the Minnesota scam. Of course, you understand that there was a scam going on in Minnesota, and we'll be giving you more stories on that very soon as they unfold. Stay tuned.
Look what I found in a Kenyan newspaper, y'all. This is U.S. agents tracing Somali fraud money in Minnesota back to Kenya. This is their USD. This number right here in alphabets, this is $250 million plus, but they're tracing all the money back to residential and commercial properties in Kenya that they're planning on ceasing They have a agreement with the Kenyan government. So the Kenyan government is in cooperation with the United States. They have a mutual agreement treaty that they both signed. You have the FBI out there. You have the IRS investigation division that's working on this, and you have the DOJ that's working on this. Now, what I find interesting is so far all that Somali scam money that they traced to Kenya to buy real estate and commercial properties, none of that money they invested in their own infrastructure. The money that they found that was sent back to Somalia was towards Al-Shabaab to create more chaos, to create more violence. But to actually build the infrastructure and invest in Somalia, even though this money is they obtained this money fraudulently, they never took none of that money back to invest back in Somalia, except the further destruction of Somalia. That's just a random thought. But yeah, they thought they got away with this, but all this property is about to be seized. Trust and believe, all this property is about to be seized because the Kenyan government is cooperating with the United States. That money in Minnesota that they scammed, you know where it went to? They brought up city blocks in Eastleigh, Nairobi, Kenya. Check this out.
Somali people, you must tell us where you're getting this money. And I can tell you, every street in Eastleigh right now has more than 10 buildings under construction. You will see these buildings covered with nets and under construction and not yet complete, or at least recently completed. Every street, and remember, Eastleigh has 12 streets. First street, second street, all the way to 12. And every street has like 10 high-rise apartments under construction or recently finished construction. Somali people have money. These people have money. I don't know what they do, how they do it. I think they're trying to make Eastleigh a city of its own in Nairobi, man.
He said buildings, like blocks of high-rise buildings being constructed. And that video is from 2023. Oh, where did all the money come from? Well, that money came from Minnesota, buddy. That's where all the money went, to buy up city blocks of high-rise apartments and business complexes. You see, they making that into a little Somalia right there in Kenya. That's where majority of the money went.
Yes, remember a few months ago I was talking about this Minnesota loot that is being traced all the way to the Kenyan real estate, and all of you guys were coming at me and saying, oh, we are jealous of the Somali community. But the real Kenyan Somali communities have been working hard, and they are true Kenyans. But we're talking about those ones that have found a way to corrupt our system because, of course, the verification process was withdrawn by the government, and they have come to Kenya. They have brought this theft all the way to Kenya, and then now the real estate is under magnifying glasses by the Trump administration. Eastleigh is being mentioned, Diani is being mentioned, Donholm, and South Sea. Hizo pesa wanakujia kitawaramba. His Excellency Natembeya was the first leader to raise the issues of our immigration system and how they are being compromised by the Somalis from Somalia. I remember the first video I did, I got a lot of DMs by Kenyan born and raised Somalis, our citizens, and how they are unable to even access or even get IDs because they don't have resources of these guys that come from Somalia and compromise the system. Let me tell you why it's dangerous for us as Kenya. First and foremost, this is becoming a very big issue in the US. What is happening in Minnesota is trailing back all the way to Kenya. Our passport will continue to be weakened. We are going to be identified as a country that harbors and encourages money laundering in this country by those guys all the way from Minnesota. And so that will be bad for business for us.
Soon and very soon, the American government and the FBI will be landing in Kenya. Yes, and they will be coming to arrest some Somalis who frauded the American government of 250 billion US dollars. You understand? So these Somalis kumbe wanakuwaga fraudsters. Unaona, wamejenga manyumba refu refu, wamejenga ploti zingine mingi mingi, kumbe hii pesa inakuwaga pesa ya kuoshwa ama pesa ya kuibwa. That is what is now turning out. Walidanganya the government of America huko Minnesota that wanataka pesa ya kuenda kusaidia watu. Kumbe hizi pesa waliziturn na waka-invest into real estate. So let us wait for the American government and the FBI to come and collect these crooks and take them back to where? To America, because I know they'll be charged in America.
There's a new update in the Minnesota daycare fraud case that Nick Shirley has been investigating, and it's worse than people thought. More evidence just came out, and a former Homeland Security investigator is now speaking up. Newly released surveillance footage shows parents dropping their kids off at a daycare, signing them in, and then taking them right back out minutes later. The kids never stayed, but on paper, they were marked as being there all day, and the government subsidies were still paid out. In some clips, parents are even seen taking cash on the spot. This wasn't a mistake. It looks coordinated. According to the former investigator, this exact setup was flagged years ago. Multiple daycare centers were investigated, and many of them barely had any kids inside, just paperwork, fake attendance logs, and steady government money coming in. The evidence was collected, cases were built, and then suddenly everything stopped. No charges, no explanation. The investigations just disappeared. That explains why so many of these daycares kept operating despite complaints and red flags. Why audits went nowhere. Why no one was ever held accountable. Now that old investigations are resurfacing and more footage is coming out, it's starting to look less like a few bad actors and more like a system that was allowed to keep going. This isn't just about wasted tax money. It's about trust in oversight and families who actually need real childcare. Do you think this was negligence, or was someone never meant to dig too deep? Drop your take in the comments.
Take a look at what the Somali gangs did in Minnesota during the $300 million Feeding Our Future scam, and it really ties this entire thing together.
We have new details on a jury tampering scheme at the center of a major fraud case. Federal prosecutors indicted 5 people for their roles in offering a juror $120,000 for a not guilty verdict in the Feeding Our Future fraud scheme. The U.S. attorney says the group targeted juror 52 because she was the youngest juror and appeared to be the only juror of color. According to court documents, they dug up information on her family online and even put a GPS tracking device on her car to track her whereabouts. During their investigation, investigators uncovered a video of one of the defendants leaving a bag of money at the juror's home. You may recall the juror came forward with the bribe, and 5 of the 7 defendants were found guilty of fraud. They were convicted for stealing millions of dollars from the government meant to feed hungry kids during the pandemic.
Tracking people, witness tampering, bribery, bags of cash. The entire Somali community in Minnesota is one big crime racket. They use their businesses for fronts. They put politicians in place as cover. They create policies that funnel taxpayer money into the pockets of Somalis. They then turn around and send that money back to Somalia to fund Islamic terrorism against America. And even after all of this, here is the Minneapolis police chief apologizing to the Somali community if they feel singled out and targeted by all of these fraud investigations. Oh yeah, and he has a Somali translator. Take a look.
community hadda caruurteena inaan garab istaagno chiefkana waa u baahannahay annagana waa isku baahannahay
عشان oo kamid ah odayaasha community-ga Soomaaliyeed iyo waalidiinta magaaladan degan ilmana ku koriyay.
The Somali community here in Minneapolis has been welcoming and has shown love towards me, and I appreciate it. Over the last 3 years, we have been working together to try and address some of the real serious problems that we have in our community. We have to be honest at times with the problems that we're having in our community, and we need our community to help us fix those problems together because it's real and it's serious. At the same time, if people have taken anything that I have said out of context in a way that's caused harm, I apologize, and I'm sorry for that, because that's not my intention at all.
That was the police chief symbolically saying, this is your city. This is your state. We're sorry that the big bad federal government is coming in here and disrupting your fraud schemes. Our liberal white guilt precludes us to accept your massive fraud of taxpayer services intended to help children. And we're sorry that the bad racist federal government is singling you out and holding you accountable. And he's forced to have a translator because how dare you expect people in America to speak English? This is their city, and the police chief is at fault for not knowing their language. They believe the burden of assimilation is on Americans to integrate into their way of life, not the other way around. They're forced to perpetuate this delusion because to do otherwise would be to admit that their ideology that there aren't good cultures and bad cultures, but all cultures are different and equally as special, is flawed and wrong, and they would no longer to be able to pat themselves on the back for being the kind of person who believes no human being is illegal on stolen land. But let me know what you guys think down in the comment section.
So guys, these investigations highlight broader issues. One is that of weak oversight in some aid programs. Two is that the challenge of tracking international money flows and the need for a strong cross-border financial cooperation. And this is why this matters. This matters because these cases raise serious questions about how public funds are protected, how international financial systems are monitored, and how the government can prevent abuse without stigmatizing any community. So as investigations continues in courts and not through social media, of course, the court will determine if the suspected people or individuals are innocent or guilty. So this story is unfolding, and if proven true, the cases could lead to policy changes, we hope. They even bring tighter controls and international cooperation. And if not, they serve as a reminder of why due process and evidence matter. So stay tuned, guys. Stay informed, stay critical, and please avoid jumping to conclusions. But I would like to hear from you, so comment down below. Yeah, I want to hear what you gotta say. So thank you for watching, and see you next time.